President Trump has made no secret of his desire to see a COVID-19 vaccine soon, ideally before the November election. How worried are you, Bill, that the approval process is being hijacked by politics?
Well, that would be a tragedy. And any suggestion that, a politician, helped create the vaccine or it's faster because of a politician is a very dangerous thing. We saw with the completely bungled plasma statements that, when you start pressuring people to say optimistic things, they go completely off the rails. And so the FDA lost a lot of credibility there. Thank goodness the companies are saying that the FDA's open-mindedness to be asked for an emergency use license before there's efficacy data. They're not going to seek that shortcut.
Do you still trust the FDA?
I think in the FDA, there's a lot of professionals. Historically, just like the CDC was viewed as the best in the world, the FDA had that same reputation as a top-notch regulator. But there's been some cracks with some of the things they've said at the commissioner level. Hopefully the staff isn't pulled in that direction.
Americans, and for that matter, Bill, citizens of the world, have been put in this awkward position where they may find themselves more trusting of what they hear from the private sector, from the companies developing these vaccines, as opposed to what they hear from this government or perhaps other governments. Given the accelerated timeline on which these vaccines are being developed, how confident are you that they'll be not just effective, but safe as well?
Well, these vaccines are going through this phase 3 trial where you look at the efficacy and you look at all the medical records to see if there's any adverse events. The companies have their reputations. Many of these companies are doing this on a not-for-profit basis, so there's not some big profit upside to many of the companies involved, including the ones that will have the most scalable, low-cost vaccines, which is 4 of the leading 6 companies here. So, vaccines are complex. There's often rare side effects, even for the vaccines that have dramatic net benefit. We're all going to be looking at the data, but a safe vaccine, I think, is very likely to come out of this R&D work.
Here's an issue I know you've put a lot of thought into. Rich countries are spending billions of dollars to put their citizens at the front of the line for a vaccine. Where does that leave the rest of the world?
Yeah, this is a very important point, because whether it's from a humanitarian point of view or strategic leadership point of view, or just preventing the epidemic coming back to the U.S. again and again and again, we need a plan to get the vaccine out to the entire world. And the U.S. has been really strong at funding R&D and trials. The U.S. has put more money into that, primarily through BARDA, than all other countries. So that's really good. The thing that the U.S. hasn't done is we haven't participated in coming up with factories and procurement money for the rest of the world. And so when we do that, and I think the Congress in both parties sees that as a priority, when we do allocate money for that, then people will see, okay, the R&D thing is coupled now with this sense that we care about the other countries and want to bring this to a close. Somewhere in the 8 to 10 billion range would fund these international activities. Our foundation is making sure that we have factories, including from the high volume Indian manufacturers, that are available to also make these vaccines.
Bill, you're talking, or you have talked, about building a coalition of governments, of businesses, and of development banks to organize and finance vaccinations for the world's poor countries. How realistic is that? in today's climate of beggar thy neighbor nationalism and regionalism?
Well, the only country that hasn't shown up for those discussions is the United States. And as I said, because the Congress has always made the US a leader on global health, we did smallpox eradication, our HIV generosity, which was started under President Bush, but has been bipartisan, has been phenomenal. People are still expecting us to fill that vacuum. And of course, whether it's 8 to 10 billion is a percentage of what we're spending domestically, that's not even 1% of what's likely to be supplemental type aid. So we need this to all come together. The sooner, the better. But other countries, including all the European leaders, have stepped forward with generous contributions. It's not enough without the US being there. The world's not used to this vacuum of leadership.
Is there a single organization that can manage a program on that scale?
Yes. There's the private sector companies have the expertise to do the trials and do the manufacturing, and we have, they've stepped up. The distribution of vaccines, rich countries logistically, that's not a huge problem. As you say, it's probably more limited by the attitudes of the people there. For the developing countries, an effort called Gavi that the US has been a big backer of buys vaccines for the poorest countries and gets them out to all the children of the world. And that's brought childhood death, yearly death of children, down from over 10 million a year now to less than 5 million. So it's a great organization. The US Congress knows it well and has backed it, and they'll, working together with other agencies, they'll have the lead on this procurement piece and cooperating with the individual countries for the distribution.
I'm assuming, Bill, you've approached the Trump administration for support for this global manufacturing and distribution plan. How responsive has the U.S. government been so far?
Yeah, I'm talking to Republicans and Democrats, Congress, executive branch. When it looked like there would be a supplemental bill, it looked like at least $4 billion for the vaccine was going to get into there. Now it's not clear whether there'll be a supplemental bill, which is unfortunate because that would have been a great vehicle. Because when we talk about ending the U.S. epidemic, that global piece has to be part of that overall picture. If there's not a supplemental bill at some point, I do think there'll be an opportunity to have that money come forward. It's literally the billions you have to spend to save trillions. So it'll be the highest impact part of whatever allocation gets made.
Can we unpack that cost for a moment? Trillions. Walk me through that. If the United States doesn't step up with money, if this doesn't get organized fast enough, if vaccines aren't manufactured and distributed around the world at the necessary pace, what's the cost? How do you measure it beyond the dollars and cents?
Well, trillions is about dollars and cents, but the damage goes way beyond that because the loss of education and the stress that people are under. But the world economy is, close to $10 trillion impacted by what's gone on so far. Back in 2015, when I talked about the risk of this, I said, that it would be over $3 trillion. And, I was clearly not, even painting as dire a picture as turned out to be the truth there. So the every month we save on bringing this epidemic to a close throughout the entire world is a month of really awful things. You can see that through economic figures, mental health figures, the deaths that are caused directly. So many things need us to get back to where we were. And the vaccine and generosity to view that as not just for the rich countries is central there.
The Gates Foundation has documented the economic catastrophe that COVID-19 has produced. Bill, what if the recovery out of this catastrophe is K-shaped, which is to say, one half of industry and society emerging from the pandemic strong and possibly stronger than before, and the other half weaker and falling further behind?
Well, as long as the disease is out there, things like tourism, restaurants, a lot of small businesses will be disproportionately affected, whereas office workers, where the virtual connections has actually meant that their loss of productivity is actually quite modest, they'll continue to have their job and be able to be fairly productive. And so the inequity of this, whether it's between citizens in the country, blue collar versus white collar, blacks experiencing a higher sickness rate than others. Poor countries can't borrow money and spend money like the US and other rich countries have. So almost every dimension of inequity has been accentuated here. And that just takes us back to, we've got to bring this thing to a close. And then you can have the tourism and the travel and the sports and the variety of things, get back to where we were before this.
The conspiracy theorists who believe that you helped to create and spread the coronavirus might be easy to dismiss if there weren't so many of them. Has that notoriety become an impediment to your efforts or the foundation's work yet?
Well, it's so crazy, to suggest the opposite, which is, we make vaccines and that has saved, millions of lives. To somehow say that the vaccine in general is malign, or that, the deaths aren't really taking place. It's surprising to me how interesting that is. So it spreads far more quickly than the truth. The big concern is that if that means that the protection of others, like wearing masks, or a willingness of enough people to take the vaccine, then it absolutely does make things worse. And the idea of how should these social media platforms try and avoid being the source of these sort of weirdly interesting falsehoods, that's a debate or discussion we're gonna have to continue to have.
One casualty of the breakdown in America's relationship with China is collaboration on virus research and virus containment. Do you share, Bill, the mistrust of China's intentions?
Well, the US-China relations have gotten very complex. And of course, as one side doesn't trust the other, then the other side does things that you can get a negative spiral. That will be a complex political issue. I do think there are cases where we can have win-win, where we're working on solving medical problems, working together on climate change innovation. So I'd hate to see this, what some people talk about, this complete decoupling. I think that would be a lose-lose.
You've been a steady advocate for engagement with China and even for interdependence with China. Do you find yourself, given what you've seen and what you know, any less willing to engage, any less in favor of interdependence?
Well, I wouldn't say we're interdependent. We benefit from each other in terms of, the US sells jet engines and entertainment, and we used to want to sell, expensive chips that would create high-paying jobs. And so I think you have to really decide where is there still mutual benefit. I doubt, and I don't think that's come down to no mutual benefit between two countries that are, and I fully understand this, increasingly wary of each other's behavior.
What's the one thing we, which is to say the world, should do to prevent the next pandemic?
Well, top of the list would be that we do the equivalent of war games, where we sit down and look at various scenarios and say, okay, what is the checklist of activities? We saw in this pandemic the countries that got the diagnostic capacity going and actually did think about travel, unlike the United States, uh, you know, mistakes in that area, they got their testing going. And so both within their country and people coming in, they had testing and quarantine capabilities that meant that the numbers, say in a country like South Korea, never got to anywhere near what they did in the United States, where we let it get to such a level that even if we were good at contact tracing, it wouldn't have been possible to do.
Joe Biden has an ambitious and expensive plan to combat climate change and shift the U.S. energy supply to renewables. Tell me, what do you think of his approach?
Well, I think ignoring climate change is a gigantic mistake. It's a very tough problem to solve, and it's one that you have to start many decades ahead of when you want that solution deployed, because you're talking about changing most of the physical economy of the world: transport, industry, buildings, electricity, all of those things, and agriculture contribute to those emissions. And many of these sources of emissions, we have no solution. So, thank goodness that we have a lot of innovation power, that we can be clever about designing policies and incentives to take things like steel and cement, which are very, very difficult, and find a way of making those without a big premium in cost, and yet having those be green products.
You're a realist, especially when it comes to science. How realistic is Biden's 100% clean energy in America by 2035?
I think that will be very difficult to achieve, because it's a great goal. We should do the model of the grid to see how you maintain reliability when you're increasingly reliant on intermittent sources. Storage is still way too expensive to make it the way to deal with that. I and many others are funding lots of storage breakthroughs. We're also funding clean sources like fission, that if we made that a lot less expensive and a lot safer, it could play a significant role here. So we don't really have that blueprint. There's an open source model that anybody can plug in what they think that'll look like, and we'll see what is the cost, what is the reliability. But without innovation, a lot of innovation, we won't be able to get there.
The Biden plan has a $2 trillion price tag. $2 trillion is a lot of money to spend in the space of 4 years. Do you have confidence that the U.S. government can do that responsibly and do it effectively?
Well, the part that I understand the best is the R&D piece. And there, that would use up some of that money. If we spent at the same level we do for health research through the NIH, which is about $35 billion a year. If we had, a National Institute for the Energy and Climate that we let grow, over a period of maybe 8 to 10 years to that level, I can see how that money would make a dramatic difference, not just for the United States, but for the world, and create all sorts of businesses that would be able to export their innovations.
Is taxpayer money best spent on deploying existing clean technologies, or is it better spent investing in new tech?
Well, you have to look across the range. There are some things that the extra cost to be green, which I call the green premium, is not gigantic. And in some cases, like adding some of your capacity as solar wind, there actually is no green premium. It's the reliability that makes the electric grid problem very difficult. Also, that we have to increase the size of that grid by over a factor of 2, because we're going to be giving up hydrocarbon sources and relying more on electricity for many, many applications. For things like steel and cement, without innovation, the premium cost of trying to do that the green way means that middle income countries like India will never agree, because they've admitted less than us, they'll never agree to reduce building very modest sized homes for their citizens just because the US emitted so many greenhouse gases in the past. So only innovation aimed at the hard problems really gives us a chance of getting to zero. We've been focused on the things that are still hard but not super hard, like passenger cars and the first 70% of the electricity. But the industrial pieces, unless we get going now and take those on and have the right policies to encourage that, I don't see any way that we'll achieve our 2050 goal.
Clearly, climate is on the ballot in November. What else is at stake for you in the election?
Well, you have, quite a contrast in terms of, picking experts, delegating to those experts. I don't speak about who I'm going to vote for, because my foundation work, we're committed to work with whatever administration there is, and we've had great relationships with both parties on that. I do think climate, you would get more focus and more expertise from Biden than from the current administration.
So you wouldn't endorse any candidates, for example?
Well, I think my beliefs are pretty clear, but I want to save my voice in terms of influencing other people, not just for things broadly, but rather things like global health and the vaccine and certain policies around education. I mean, people are going to hear enough from me on things that I really do have depth, and I'm giving away billions of dollars to try to improve. And so, I'll save my voice for those areas of deep involvement, which includes climate.
There are overlaps between the challenge of fighting the pandemic and the challenge of fighting climate change. What steps can government take to address them both at the same time?
Well, the idea that you count on government to see problems out in the future and to really look at the science and understand what will work, what won't work. The pandemic illustrates that government didn't look out for us, despite the warnings that were out there. Climate fits that same paradigm. Sadly, in the case of climate, as it gets worse and worse towards the end of the century, there isn't anything like a vaccine that you can spend, tens of billions on, and then boom, your mistakes, although they're horrific, you can bring it to a close. Climate change is much harder, and the damage that will be done every year will be greater than what we've seen during this pandemic. So, I hope it's a wake-up call to think, okay, what else are we being warned about? Does it take, what percentage of government resources would that take? And, holding people to account that even things that take a long time, we have to get started now on.
One of the things common to both the pandemic and to climate change is a growing mistrust of science. Where will this country end up, Bill, if voters don't believe what scientific data show and what scientific models indicate?
Well, I think it's more, who do they trust? Science, no one knows all of science. I'm a perennial student, and the percentage I know is very, very small. But there is this way of picking really good people, having really open debates about what's known, what's not known, trying different things out. There's an approach that science teaches us that lets us find what those right investments should be. Will this vaccine work? Will this bridge fall down? All sorts of things that really, really count, that you don't expect the population themselves to know, but you should pick somebody who believes in experts and, can admit mistakes and is willing to come up with a long-term plan, and just saying, hey, we're a selfish country. Well, for some things that works, but for some things, without global cooperation, it's a huge problem for this country. So, I think it's more to do with engaging smart approaches than the public knowing a lot of science themselves.
When you describe those desirable attributes, do you have anyone in mind?
Well, somebody who's proven that they have wisdom and that they pick very strong people and they'll build a team approach. That's what we do when we give out money as a foundation, and that we have fortunately a lot of success using that approach.
You're a prominent investor in energy technology. Where do you see the best prospects right now for genuine breakthroughs?
Well, the breakthroughs are all going to be high risk. Breakthroughs in storage. I've lost a lot of money on battery companies, but there's some great ones like Form, QuantumScape. Anyway, a bunch that are still, pursuing very ambitious dreams. I think nuclear fission shouldn't be counted out because next generation designs can be very safe and very, very economic, and that would fit into the picture very well. Even things that are kind of far out, like fusion, that we can't count on it, we should continue to invest because the potential there is very, very large. So we're short, about 24 great innovations that include how do you make steel, how do you make cement, not easy problems, but if you back 20 or 30 approaches to each of these problems, your chance of success is actually pretty high, particularly if you build an initial market, even when the product is still premium priced, to help it get that volume to get down and become totally price competitive, like car batteries or solar panels.
Storage would clearly be a game changer as far as the shift to renewable energies like wind and solar is concerned. Are we any closer to what you've called the storage miracle?
No, the storage miracle means, just take Tokyo over a 2-week period where there's a typhoon, so, none of the renewable sources are available. That's more energy than, all the batteries the world has ever built times a large number. So for car batteries, yes, we've done a great job, and the kind of incremental improvement that is clearly going to come along will allow passenger electric cars to go from the few percent they are today to over the next decade or two to be very mainstream. So that's super good news. That's only a piece of the transport problem. Planes are much, much harder than passenger cars. But when we look at storage, we should acknowledge that grid level storage, there's a very good chance that we'll never have that breakthrough. So we have to pursue alternate paths to having a completely clean, reliable, dramatically enlarged electricity supply.
You've described electric cars as the quote unquote easy part of the green economy. Is that to say, Bill, that there isn't perhaps as much value to companies like Tesla or Nikola as the stock market suggests?
No, well, the fact that Elon Musk and others did a great electric car is a huge contribution to the climate change effort. That he did it with quality. It's still a little premium priced, but fine. He's got that initial market, and that market's going to grow, and all the other car companies, seeing his success, will come in. The question of, what's the profit per car, and what's the market share of Tesla, that's for stock people. That's not a climate change issue at all. The difficulty on the other areas is much higher. So I'm not saying that, I'm not trivializing in any way the need to raise the market share of EVs, but on a relative basis, that's far easier than the industrial economy, where our progress is very, very small. And even the Department of Energy, because it really isn't part of their writ to think how to make steel. So we are grossly underinvested in these hard areas.
Elon Musk has built a great electric car. He's designed and built reusable rockets. He's an innovator in tunneling technology. Bill, you knew Steve Jobs relatively well. Microsoft competed vigorously with Apple. Microsoft, when you were CEO, was an investor in Apple. People have described Elon Musk as the new Steve Jobs. Is he the new Steve Jobs?
If you know people personally, then that kind of gross oversimplification it seems strange. Elon's more of a hands-on engineer. Steve was a genius at design and picking people and marketing. You wouldn't walk into a room and confuse them with each other.
That's interesting. And do you find yourself as impressed by the things people are doing today on the cutting edge of industrial technology like that as you might have been 20 years ago?
Well, innovation today is more rapid. In fact, the tools of digital technology that people like myself and Steve Jobs were lucky enough to be involved in building, that's actually allowed sharing of information and global cooperation to work on tough problems to be far better. And we're seeing that with the speed of these, we're creating these vaccines. We couldn't have done that 10 years ago. With climate, we need all of that increased speed and more. We need policies, we need more R&D money, we need more risk capital because of all those hard areas. But yes, innovation's accelerating, and that's the only reason you can be optimistic about climate change, is that the developed countries will get involved in this cause, including cooperating with each other.
Bill, I'm going to leave it there. I want to say thank you very much. I had some reservations about asking you one more question, as I just did, but you did a beautiful job of wrapping our entire conversation together with a great answer. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you. It was great.